Hey, look, if you have a Bible, do me a favor, open up to Mark chapter 14. That's where we're going to be today, Mark 14 and beginning of 15. While you're turning there, I guess I should introduce myself if we haven't met. Welcome. My name's Burt. I'm one of the pastors here. Thanks for getting up. Thanks for spending your Sunday with us. And you're joining us in a series right now that's called Marked for Glory, where what we're doing is going into Easter, because Easter's not that far away, which is wild to think about. We're reading the narratives in the Gospel of Mark that have to do with Jesus' last days in his earthly ministry, his entry into Jerusalem, his trial, his eventual death, and then we'll celebrate on Easter Sunday his resurrection. And so we're just asking the Lord to prep our hearts for that celebration as we go through these stories. And as we do that, today, we're going to read a story where Jesus, he does things in a way that's incredible, very, very selfless. Like he could have justice for himself, and he chooses not to take it because he loves us greater than his own personal well-being. And I read stories like the one that we're going to read today, and I just go man, I am so not like Jesus. Just, in case, if you didn't know that, like pastors, we're not we don't just float into the room, right? We need Jesus as much as everybody else, okay? And then this is an area where the Lord just continues to form me, so we believe that that you're saved by God's grace as a gift, that you can't earn salvation, but if you believe that Jesus died for your sin and rose from the dead, God gives you eternal life. He chooses to forgive your sin. You haven't earned that. And then what happens is you receive the Holy Spirit, right? And he begins to change you. He begins to what's called sanctify you, make you more like Jesus. And that's a lifelong process, which means that during this life, man, we botch it all the time. And we all have areas that the Lord continues to refine and change. And I thought I'd just begin by telling you one of mine. How about that? I've mentioned this before, but I'll just say it again. An area where I'm not like Jesus is that I am very currently is that, and these are things that the Lord's convicting. I'm a bit of a Karen. Okay, do you know? Okay, do you know what I mean by that? A Karen is typically a middle-aged woman who feels very entitled and very loud about things that she feels entitled to. It's somebody's. I see you way back there, Karen. Sometimes, but that's me. Okay, so I have an aunt named Karen. She hates that title, but for me, it's accurate. I've told stories of that. I'll give you another one. So this past summer, or was it past year? My family and I, we did our vacation, and we went to Disneyland in Anaheim, California, because we're Disney park people. We love that. So we decided to go to the original House of Mouse, and then we went out there. And Disneyland, if you've never been there, it's a little bit different than Disney World. And not just because it's smaller, but because the entire culture of the park is different. Disney World is this worldwide hub where people come in from all over the place to be there, and it's I think 40 square miles. It's massive. But Disneyland, a large chunk of the people who visit it are locals. And so they're constantly having to keep things fresh so that locals want to come back. And locals, because they're local and they got their annual pass, it's not a life-changing trip, so they just kind of take the magic for granted, and they do things that you don't really see at Disney World. One of the things I saw that the locals did there was they found ways to milk the ride line system. They found ways to take advantage of that. For us poor schlubs who are waiting 2 hours in line, locals find ways around that. So, the first time I saw it, it kind of took me back for a second there. So we're waiting in line, and there's just a guy in front of us. And so we wait the length, because that's part of the Disney experience. You just wait for most of your day, right? And as we're getting near the end of the line, this group of people just comes up through the line and stand next to the guy who was in front of us. And we're like, whoa, what's that all about? But see, this is what the locals there do, is they'll have a scout, right? And scouts in the line, and they wait the line while their friends and family go ride the other rides, and they come meet them. Now, I find that extremely unethical, okay? All right, and so, the first time it happened, I was oh, that was really inconsiderate. And then it happened again. And then again, I was like, So I get on my Disneyland app, and I start just texting customer service to let them know about this injustice that they're turning a blind eye to in their park. And so I'm like, hey, so this is happening, and I'm very, very upset. And and the AI bot's like, I'm so sorry that you're upset, Burt. And I'm like, okay, all right. Oh, clearly my cries for justice are not being met. And so on the fifth or sixth time, I decided I'm not going to be a victim of this. And so, okay, if they're going to make my experience more miserable, I'm going to make their experience more miserable. So we were in line for Star Wars: Rise of the Resistance, and it's like a 2-hour wait, and we're going through it, and I hear, like, there's 2 people in front of us, and I hear them talking to their family members on the phone, and they're going like, yeah, no, we're almost through. Why don't you come on in now? Yeah, like, leave that ride, come meet us up here. We'll be there. We'll just come on through. We're almost there. And I went, mm-mm. So sure enough, we're getting closer to the end, and here comes the family to join the people up front, and I just went, boo! And they stopped, and like they're, like, I'm from the East Coast, we're a lot more confrontational than the West Coast, right? So like they kind of stopped and they looked back and went, boo! You're being inconsiderate. Boo! Right? And my wife now, she's like embarrassed. She's like covering her face. She's like, I just like, stop it. And my kids are like, right? And I decided, like, for the rest of that line, if they're going to be there, I'm going to be here, and I'm going to make it so they reconsider cutting in front of other people, because that's what it is. Okay? My sense of justice went through the roof because I'm a Karen. But Jesus, see, look, yeah, some of you are mad, like, you're like, why did I never think of that? It's great. It gets rid of a lot of stress, so you know. But here's the thing. The story we're going to read, that's a very, very small thing for me to demand personal justice on, isn't it? I mean, it's small, it's petty. But what we're about to read is Jesus on trial for his life. And he could go, no. That's not, no, what you guys are saying about me is false. What you're doing right now is wrong. But he doesn't. And the reason for that, we're going to discover, is incredibly significant. And so in Mark chapter 14, here's what we see. So Jesus, he's been betrayed by Judas. He's been arrested. And now he goes to this sham of a trial with his critics, the religious leaders, the priests, everybody who, like, they're jealous of him. They consider him a threat to their religion. And so here's what happens in Mark 16, starting in verse 53. It says, and they led Jesus to the high priest. And all the chief priests and the elders and the scribes came together. So you have, like, just this, this conclave. Everybody just come together, and they've assembled for the purpose of the trial of Jesus of Nazareth. Verse 54, and Peter followed him at a distance right into the courtyard of the high priest. And as he was sitting there with the guards, warming himself by the fire. Verse 55, now the chief priests and the whole council were seeking testimony against Jesus to put him to death. But they found none. Verse 56, for many bore false witness against him, but their testimony did not agree. So this is just kind of wild. Okay, like, they've set up a sham of a trial. Like, the people who are there, they have assembled for the purpose of declaring Jesus guilty, and yet they're so bad at it that you have people who are coming in who have been, like, hired to bring up false testimony. But even there, their testimonies, like, they're contradicting each other. And so even the people whose mission it is to go, like, let's find him guilty, are going, all right, this isn't really that great. Like, the evidence here that we're presenting isn't that good. Like, that's how bad they are at it. So it continues, verse 57. And some stood up and bore false witness against him, saying, we heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I'll build another not made with hands, which is kind of a twisting of his words. 59. Yet even about this, their testimony did not agree. Verse 60. And the high priest stood up in the midst and asked Jesus, have you no answer to make? What is it these men testify against you? But he remained silent and made no answer. So Jesus is standing there in front of everybody, and they're saying things about him that aren't true. This is a trial where if it goes south, it will cost him his life. If it's me, I'm defending myself. If no, Your Honor, you understand? Okay, actually, no. But he's just quiet. And the reason that he's quiet is he has set himself on the path of death. If he defends himself, and listen, we've seen this in the Gospels. Like, if he gets into a vocal sparring match with the Pharisees, the scribes, the Sadducees, he thrashes them. Like, they leave with their jaws to the floor because he's just that far above them. But not this time. And this time he's quiet because he set himself on the pathway of his eventual death for us. And on top of that, something really significant is happening. This idea of Jesus choosing to be silent, it's not just a neat little detail that speaks to his character, although certainly it does. It's also a fulfillment of prophecy. See, 700 years before Jesus, there was this prophet named Isaiah. And God spoke all these things to Isaiah. And he was talking about future events and all these things that would happen. And one of the things that happens as you read the book of Isaiah, which is in our Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, is you find this moment where Isaiah begins to describe this person who's off in the future. We call him the suffering servant. But it's this person who, Isaiah looks at him and he just sees it. And it's weird. This is what it says in Isaiah 53, starting in verse 3. It says, he was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and as one from whom men hid their faces. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Watch this, verse 4. But surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. Okay, so all right, look, when we look at this guy, he seems like he's just not a great guy. There's nothing about his physical appearance that we should look at him and be like, man, I want to be around that guy. He's, earthly speaking, he's just kind of unassuming. And on top of that, we're seeing him, he's being stricken, and we consider him smitten by God. In other words, we're seeing him suffer, but we believe that actually the reason he's suffering is that because God is judging him. He's judging him for his own sin. But he goes, but here's what we didn't realize. And so continuing in verse 5, it says, but he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Now, really quick, those are religious words. Let me explain them to you. Okay, so the word transgressions, the word that we translate as transgressions is the Hebrew word pasha. And what it means is rebellion. Okay, so this guy, he's dying not because of his own rebellion. He's dying for our rebellion. Okay, like knowing what is good, choosing not to do it. I should have done this, I should do that, but I'm not gonna, because I'm gonna do it my way or the way that I want. This guy dies for that. And this other word that we translate as iniquities, it's the Hebrew word avon. And what it has to do with is like a twisting of a road or like a corrupting of something. Simply put, if we understand what an iniquity is sin that you're committing that you don't realize that you're committing. And the reason you're committing it is because your worldview, your entire way of life is sinful. So it's not that it's necessarily a conscious choice where you realize this is a rebellion, but because you're a sinful person, you do it this way. So for instance, maybe you're being selfish. Well, generally, selfish people don't realize that they're selfish. But this guy dies for that. Maybe you're greedy. Well, generally, greedy people don't realize that they're being greedy. I mean, we could go on. That's an iniquity. It's okay. There's a right way, and you're not walking in it. And so just like when we understand what this is saying, it's saying this guy is going to die for the full scope of sin, deliberate and undeliberate. He's going to die for everything. He's rather than us receiving God's penalty for our sin, it falls on this guy instead. And so it continues, and it says, upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace. And by his wounds, we're healed. Well, how can it be? How can that happen? Well, it continues in verse 6. All we like sheep have gone astray. All of us, hey guys, all of us have sinned. That's the idea right now. We've turned everyone to his own way. And the Lord has laid on him, this suffering servant, the iniquity of us all. So Isaiah looks to the future, and he's like, okay, why are you bringing this up right now? It's important to know that this passage is there for a number of reasons. I'll give you one. Years ago, I had a friend who, her background, she was Jewish, and she believed on Christ. She believed that Jesus was the promised Messiah of the Hebrew Bible. And you can imagine, because she was the only one in her family that did that, that created a lot of controversy and disagreement, arguments, difficulty in her family, because many folks in her family, they consider her betraying their family by believing in the Christian God, And I remember one of the things that she sat down with me to talk about was a couple of family members had actually sent her some YouTube videos of this guy who, the best way to describe it would be he was an evangelistic rabbi. In other words, like what he would do was he specialized in trying to explain why Jesus couldn't be the promised Messiah of the Hebrew Bible. And I remember hearing this guy's arguments, and he was great at Old Testament but he was terrible at New Testament theology. Like, he just didn't tend to really get concepts from the New Testament. And one of the things that he said that really struck me was he went, look, okay, aside from all these bad ways that Christians are reading the Hebrew Bible, there's nowhere in the Hebrew Bible that says somebody's going to die for somebody else. To which I wanted to just say to him, like, right there. Isaiah 53, written 700 years before Christ. It's right there. And you go, okay, well, look, Burt, like, weren't we talking about Jesus not opening his mouth and being quiet? Yeah, about that. So continue to verse 7, where it says this. He was oppressed, and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. So keep that in mind. And look again at Mark 14, verse 61. But he remained silent and made no answer. Why? He's fulfilling this. This is why the gospel authors are going like, whoa, remember that? Yeah, I remember that. Why? Because, well, Isaiah prophesied that. Yeah, there it is. And this caused everybody in the trial to just be like, whoa, hold on. And so it says, again, the high priest asked him, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? In other words, okay, so Jesus is being quiet. He's not saying anything to this sham of a trial. And so finally the high priest, exasperated, goes like, are you the Christ? Meaning, are you the promised king? Are you the one that's prophesied about in the Hebrew Bible, the Son of the Blessed? Meaning, are you the Son of God? That's his claim right now. Or that's what he's asking. Are you this promised king? Are you actually divine? Okay, and this Jesus finally says he's going to answer it. And the reason is this. And what you find in this trial happening is this. Jesus only speaks when it further moves him towards death. Like, the only time he's going to answer in all of this is when it moves him towards his mission being fulfilled. And so he's been quiet, he's been quiet, he's been quiet, he's been taking it, he's been taking it, he's been taking it. And now here's the high priest, and he goes, are you who you say that you are? Are you the Christ? Are you the Son of the Blessed? Meaning, are you the Son of God? In verse 62, Jesus takes the filter off. Jesus says, I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, coming with the clouds of heaven. Now, let me tell you why that is so blasphemous if it's not true. Why everybody in that room would stop and go, whoa. Because when he claims that he is the promised king, that's not blasphemy. Like, they had no framework for the idea that the Messiah is actually God, even though, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe. Like, they didn't even think about that being him actually walking among them. But when he says coming with the clouds of heaven, listen, like, for us, like, if you've got a Christian background and you know the gospel story, you're like, yeah, Jesus, think about, like, he rides, like, he goes up into heaven on a cloud. Like, yeah, that's what Jesus does. He rides clouds. Neat. You don't know what that means. Look, as you go through the Hebrew Bible, our Old Testament, there's only one person who rides the clouds. It's God. Look, let me show you some examples. Psalm 104, verse 3, this is what it says. It says, he lays the beams on the waters, and he makes the clouds his chariot. He rides on the wings of the wind. It's talking about the Lord. Again, Isaiah 19, verse 1. Behold, the Lord is riding on a swift cloud. He comes to Egypt. Nahum 1, verse 3. The Lord is slow to anger and great in power. He's quoting Exodus there. And the Lord will by no means clear the guilty. His way is in whirlwind and storm, and the clouds are the dust of his feet. Like, this idea of, okay, when Jesus goes, you're going to see the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. Do you know how blasphemous that is? Because he just claimed to be God. All right, and this is important, by the way. Like there are cults out there. I'll give you an example of Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses is not Christianity. It departs from the faith. And one of the things that Jehovah's Witnesses do to try and keep people believing that the fake gospel that they're selling is they actually omit parts of the Bible and they change wording and stuff. But the guys that came up with the Watchtower's Bible, they weren't necessarily they weren't Bible scholars, and they didn't know what they were doing. So there are all kinds of points where they missed it. They missed changing words of stuff. And so they didn't even think about this implication like of Jesus riding clouds and him being God. That completely went over their heads, and so it's still there. And you think about the Old Testament. You go back through the space of it, everybody understood that God is the one who rides in the clouds. And then time goes on. And you have the prophet Daniel. And Daniel, he lived in Babylon, and he lived under like Babylonian rule with Nebuchadnezzar. And while that's going on, during this time period, Daniel prays and he receives visions from God about future governments. Like Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians, they were to them, like in Daniel's world, they were sort of this worldwide empire. That's how they were saw, this conquering, massive empire. And Daniel begins to have visions of the future of Babylon falling and the other empires that would take their place. And it's really fascinating to read. That happens around 535 BC, and those prophecies have since been filled. And after the different empires that rise and fall that Daniel sees, he sees this other one. And unlike the other empires that rise and fall, the other kingdoms that come and go, this one's different. It's eternal. It doesn't end at all. And he says this about it in Daniel 7, starting in verse 13. He says, I saw in the night, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a, look at that phrase, Son of Man. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. So this causes Daniel to stop because, hold on, this is weird. Here's why. Okay, so he sees, Son of Man means he looks like a human being. Okay, so he sees this being who looks like a human being, but he's doing God stuff. Like he's riding on the clouds. And on top of that, okay, there's the Ancient of Days. He's on his throne, but here comes this person who stands before him. So he's God, but yet here's God. Like how does that work? This is, by the way, like when people say, like, well, the Trinity wasn't invented to the New Testament. Not true. I mean, it's right here in Daniel 7. Okay, like here's God with God. And so he's presented before him and says, verse 14, and to him was given dominion and glory, and a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom is one that shall not be destroyed. Okay, so just think, okay, man, like it's the eternal kingdom. It's not going anywhere. Unlike every other kingdom that's risen and fallen. And by the way, guys, it's been 2,000 years, and his kingdom has endured. But think about, okay, so there's going to be a Son of Man, and he rides on the clouds. Transition it back to Mark. Remember what Jesus said to him in verse 62. I am, and you will see and there it is, Son of Man. He's calling himself that figure from Daniel. Seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven. And so everybody just stops like, okay, and here's where, it just cuts through because now they don't need a sham trial. What he has just said there. And so look at this, verse 63. And the high priest tore his garments and said, what further witnesses do we need? You have heard his blasphemy. What's blasphemy? Blasphemy is lying about God. And so like the high priest instantly, because he's got a Jewish background, he knows the scriptures, he knows what Jesus just claimed there. And so, okay, again, it's not blasphemous to claim that you're the Messiah. You can just be wrong about that. But to say that you're the Son of Man, to say that you ride with the clouds of heaven means basically you're claiming, listen, I'm God himself in front of you. And so the high priest, is in anguish. He tears his robes. He's like, this is blasphemy. Like, what else do we need to hear? You've heard his blasphemy. What is your decision? It says, and they all condemned him as deserving death. Verse 65, and some began to spit on him and to cover his face and to strike him, saying, prophesy. And the guards received him with blows, meaning, so they're so infuriated. They're spitting on him. They're covering his face while they strike him. Basically, they're saying, tell us who hit you. If you're a prophet, go ahead, prophesy to us. Wham. For the sake of time, we need to jump forward. And so jump over to chapter 15. And so they go through some things. They leave that procession. And now they're brought before the people who actually have the power to execute Jesus, the Roman governor Pilate. So Mark 15, starting verse 1, says this: "And as soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. And they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate. And Pilate asked him, 'Are you the king of the Jews?' And he answered, 'You've said so.'" Let me explain. Okay. So Pilate, he's been in the city for a while. He was there last week when Jesus went riding in on a donkey and everybody's celebrating and saying, "Hosanna, blessed is the Son of David," right? And so he knows people love Jesus. And he knows that the rumors that Jesus is claimed to be this promised king, Messiah, the king of the Jews. And so Pilate goes, are you that? But you see, Pilate, he doesn't have a worldview the way that the high priest did, where the high priest could understand when Jesus would say things to him. And so Jesus, when he looks at him and he says, "You've said so," basically what he's saying is, I am, but not in the way that you understand. Pilate would hear, okay, if Jesus says, yes, I am the king of the Jews, what Pilate would hear is earthly government. And so, when he says, "You've said so," basically what he's doing is, it's not a direct affirmation, but it's not a denial. It's what Pilate could handle. That's why you can find, in John's account, Jesus says to him, he goes, "My kingdom is not of this world." That's the general idea right here. And so, continuing in verse 3, it says this: "And the chief priests accused him of many things. And Pilate asked him again, 'You no answer to make? See how many charges they bring against you?' But Jesus made no further answer, so that Pilate was amazed." And again, we find him as a lamb going to the slaughter, did not open his mouth. That's exactly what's happening right now. Okay, and Pilate, he's been in government long enough. He's seen people on trial for their lives and scrambling and, "Oh my gosh, no, you don't understand. What they're saying isn't true. No, let me make a case for myself." But Jesus just stands there silently. And he just takes all the things that they're saying about him. So Pilate's amazed. Now watch this, continuing in verse 6. "Now, at the feast, he," talking about Pilate, "used to release for them one prisoner for whom they asked." And so, it's Passover, it's a celebration, and the tradition is once a year to have good faith with the people because the people don't want the Romans there. A way that Pilate would appease them was he would release a requested prisoner, just one. Verse 7, "And among the rebels in prison who had committed murder in the insurrection, there was a man called Barabbas. And the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do as he usually did for them. 'Hey, you usually release for us somebody, release somebody.' And so he goes, 'Okay.' And so he answered them saying, 'Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews? Hey, I know this guy's popular with you. Do you want me to release him to you?' Why does he do that? Verse 10, "For he perceived that it was out of envy that the chief priests had delivered him up." Even then, Pilate knows that this trial is a sham. He understands why they're doing what they're doing. And so he tries to give Jesus an out. Verse 11, "But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release for them Barabbas instead. And Pilate said to them, okay, well, then what shall I do with the man you call the king of the Jews?" And they cried out again, verse 13, "Crucify him." Verse 14, "And Pilate said to them, 'Why? What evil has he done?' But they shouted all the more, 'Crucify him.'" Okay, do you understand how extreme of a death crucifixion is, that it causes a Roman governor to stop and go, "Why?" Do you know how little the Romans valued the life of peasants? For them, your worth as a human being came from how much power and money do you have. Jesus means something like that. That's how extreme of a death crucifixion was. And so here they are, and they're going, "Crucify him." He's like, "Why?" But they're riling the crowd, "Crucify him." Verse 14, "And Pilate said to them, 'Why? What evil has he done?' But they shouted all the more, 'Crucify him.'" Verse 15, "So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified." Pilate, wishing to put out the beginnings of a rebellion, what could be a riot, is even willing to hand over to crucifixion a man that he believes is innocent. And I say that because I want you to understand something, that everybody in this story besides Jesus is guilty. Everybody. Including this guy that we mentioned, Barabbas. This guy who is a murderer. He's led rebellion. And actually, it's kind of interesting. There's something to know with that. So this guy, so just imagine the scenario. You've got Jesus on trial, okay, and what happens is there's a switch. Jesus, who should go free, is detained, and this guy, Barabbas, is released instead. And that name, of every name, of anybody who could be there, is Barabbas. Do you know what that name means? It means son of the Father. Meaning, oh my gosh, you guys, you have this man who is the illegitimate son of the Father, who is full of guilt, and he's released, while the legitimate son of the Father, who has no guilt, chooses to remain and die in his place. You starting to get the picture right now? You starting to understand what's happening? Here in front of everybody's eyes, there's an eternal truth that's playing out. They don't even realize it. There's something incredible that's happening, like something that's world-changing, and it's just right there, like physically lived in front of them. And they don't see it. Maybe you don't either. Okay, let me help you. About 10 years ago, I saw a sermon or a clip of a sermon that Judah Smith had done about this story of Jesus and Barabbas. In fact, it's the best I've ever heard anybody preach on this. And honestly, I'm not going to do it better, and I feel no need to reinvent the wheel. So if you want to understand what's happening in this moment in the story with Barabbas, I want to just show you this clip to help us understand what's going on here. So let's watch this together.